we'll get things going. So yeah, it's been such a privilege to work with so many different organizations and brokers and agents since 2004. And at the heart of all that has been sort of innovation theory, strategic thinking around technology, deployment of that, and of course, consistently trying to create things relevant for our constituents and our clients, which would be consumers and agents. So the genesis of this panel came out of part of my teaching at Loyola University Chicago in the School of Communications. And I came across this article here from the Gartner Research Report called The 6 Forces That Will Shape Business and Technology in 2030. And basically was, or is, an interview between Fortune 50 CIOs where they prognosticate about the future. I immediately said this would be a great Realty Alliance, a great RESO panel. So I emailed Craig and put me in touch with Jeremy, and here we are. And we have this amazing panel who's going to talk about similar issues related to that article. So we have Alon over here from Home Services of America, the Chief Information Officer. We have Matt right here, who is the Chief Strategist for Clarity Consulting. We have Chad Curry, who is the actual true mad scientist for the Center for Realtors Technology. And I have to say this, whether he's going to slap me afterwards or not, I always think of walking in his lab, which if you've not been to our NAR headquarters, visit the lab. It is like Q from James Bond. Literally. It's awesome. And it's just, tinkering, playfulness, but amazing stuff he's doing with the center point being realtors and how it's going to move the needle from so many different levels. And then we have Charlie here from Watson Realty, one of my favorite companies in entire America. And then Sam, who is a broker owner of a very powerful small firm out of, who's also affiliated with Cole Baker. And so I'm here to sort of steward this panel, but I want us to, before we get started, a little framing exercise and just have us contemplate this term, technology. Right? It has so much meaning in our industry, from finding a technology savvy agent or an agent saying, technology, I can't handle it, right? I just don't want it anymore. And I think that this has sometimes good and pejorative connotations as it's being deployed through our organizations and systems. But is this sort of how we view technology? This is how I always like to start off viewing technology. This sense of playfulness and irrational exuberance that it can fix anything, that it can really change for the betterment of our industry so many different things for both consumers and agents, brokerages, and ultimately larger organizations, of which we have the Realty Alliance and our MLS organizations. But what really happens when we get to the point of implementing technology, it gets a little ugly. We have to do the work. We try to keep it fun, but sometimes we lose our pants doing so. But when we get to the point where our agents adopt something, that's super fun, right? We want to go out. We think this is it. We get to the promised land, and we just really appreciate that opportunity to see the light bulbs go off in the agents' heads, or better yet, they're closing more deals, they're getting more clients, which at the end of the day, that's really all they care about. Get another deal, get another client. And that's okay, because that's what helps us all, right? Nothing happens without a sale, right? And nevertheless, we continue to walk down this technology road, sometimes naked, but hopefully not afraid. And so this panel will put clothes on these 6 issues, from global to personal, hierarchies to meshes, fixed to fungible assets, devices to connected humans and things, big data to algorithmic business, and resources to smart materials. And that's where we're going to start. This slide's going to stay up here so we can all look at it. If you don't know what all this means, don't worry about it. The panel here will explain it. And we will strive to make it relevant, but I will also ask you to say, how will this work, these concepts work in my brokerage? And you'll be stretched, right? This is part of this panel, is to stretch yourself, to think, how can this future evolve? So I'm going to start, I'm going to get off the stage here and sort of just go off to the side here. I'm going to start with Matt here to just say that, let's start with global to personal and see what that means and how he's thinking about that. And then it'll be a spirited debate, believe me.
Well, a lot of these trends kind of work together. And I think global personal is one of the more exciting trends on the list. Anyone who works in technology, anyone who works in software, they want to build software that, to the end user, is magic, that creates that exuberance that our fearless leader here mentioned. And part of that is personalization. Right now it's ridiculous. People come to these sites, they use these database searches. It looks very old school. At some point, we're going to get to the point where we're going to know from people's social profiles, we're going to know so much about them that everything just happens for them. And how today you go to a weather app to see what the weather is, and I don't know how many of you use things like Dark Skies. It knows where you are, it knows where the clouds are, it knows when it's going to rain. It just pops up and tells you when something's going to happen. You don't have to go to it. And right now in our real estate software, everyone has to go to your app, go to your website. Instead, hopefully one day, your software, knowing them better, is going to prompt them and just visit them and let them know when they're near a property they need to see.
So let me ask you a question. So I'm out here. The concept of, like you mentioned, Dark Skies, how is the experience across other platforms in basically the verticals changing the expectations of consumers related to our industry, right? And then how does Resos focus on standards help align what we're doing to those expectations that are being set by other firms like Amazon, Apple, etc.?
Well, right now, as an industry, we're really not using this first trend, global to personal, very well. We're not collecting information about the consumer. We're not really using it effectively. When we do, it's kind of a bad user experience. And again, they're downloading other apps, like I mentioned, a weather app, but there's so many others where it knows them, it learns them, and it just interacts proactively with them. In terms of a standards organization, obviously, we are going to have to push for and leverage social APIs. And obviously, there's a dark side to that, which I'm sure we're going to talk a lot more about, which is privacy and security and controlling our information.
Yeah, and I would say to that too, the term I don't like to use is disruption. This is evolution, right? So making it go from global to personal, the access to information is what's changed. I watched Ghostbusters the other night with my kids, 1984, right? In order to figure out what was happening in one department, they had to go to a book to reference it. They had to go down to the Hall of Records to find anything. So there's all this time invested in that. There was a personal experience one-on-one with that piece of information. Now the information is scattershot. It's everywhere. You can go anywhere and get it. Bringing that together and making that personal experience happen again, that's the real trick in this. And I think that's where we're feeling that anxiety, is how do we make it personal again? And I think what the younger buyers want from us is for us to know more about them than they may even about themselves, right? Because that will customize that experience and make it seem more of a bespoke experience.
Do you think it's a concern when you're looking at sort of personal identifiable information? And I know I see this quite a bit in my students where they're willing to trade privacy for convenience. And I'm thinking, is that something that will be a shift to the future? Sort of living in the infosphere, if you will, and having my identity constantly evaluated, understood, taken apart? Or will, as they get older and become, I think, Alon, you were talking about, the 18-year-old person where you're starting to focus some of your efforts and thinking from home services mindset, you may not be creditworthy right now as an 18-year-old, but when you're 21 to 22, 23, 24, let us as home services start helping you build that creditworthiness. When you get to the point when you want to buy or rent or something like that, we're there as part of our family of companies to help steward that. Do you think that shift in identity, that trading personally identifiable information for convenience will stick, or do you think as people age, they'll shift the focus around wanting to control more of that?
Well, certainly we're all here, everybody in the group, our stewards of data, and data is very, very massive. And the service is rooted in understanding. So as we seek to understand our consumers, as we seek to understand really the property market, each home, each parcel, I think it's critical that we maintain that trust, because a lot of those younger folks are looking for somebody to trust. There's so much information there. You need a trusted advisor to help you make sense and weight or score the relevance of that data for you, and lead you through a transaction and really a life of services for us. And so as we think about our information and the underlying data, we're looking to build and maintain that trust. That means that people do come to us and say, hey, maybe I'm not right now ready to buy or sell, but I want you to understand me because I want exceptional service. I want that service to be personalized and in time, right? Delivered in time. And I think as we, particularly in this room, really think about tracking event data, create standards for understanding all the consumer behavior. As we increasingly focus on homes, and if you think about a home and a consumer as somebody who's lived in their home for 30 years, and we know a lot about the house, how does that listing data, which increasingly is going to contain things like energy efficiency and other elements that are really reflective of the value of the owner, how does that home data become integrated with the personal data? And as we steward, traditionally we've thought about stewarding the home data or the property data. Now, more and more elements of the consumer behavior are integrated into that home data, and we need, I think, to kind of step up our stewardship efforts to make sure that we protect that data, we secure it, and that we use it ethically to serve our consumers.
Right, so I think ethics is definitely something that is an issue that will come to the fore. In terms of trust, at Stanford University, there's a guy whose name is B.J. Fogg. He runs the Center for Computer-Human Interaction there. He talks about trust quite a bit through digital, mobile, and he's boiled trust down into sort of three main trust indicators. One, design trust indicators, two, performance trust indicators, and three, informational trust indicators. And I think the third trust indicators, informational trust indicators, is not so much how a label is deployed or a button conversion that, a label. It's more, if you get into it, in terms of identity, in terms of who I am as a consumer. Trust will be this, I love the term stewardship, because it also implies sort of how, without sort of taking it too far off this, it's, how does a Forest Service manage the forest, or how does the government manage several wilderness areas? It's stewardship for future generations. And even though consumers may not be aware at the millennial age that their privacy is a huge issue, we as an industry, I think you're arguing, should step up that focus right now. Now, Sam, you were talking a little bit about trust in penetrating the millennial veneer of keep away. And then how, you've had some interesting experiences with sort of getting into the trust sphere of millennial, and then all of a sudden it's opened up to you as almost like a true trusted advisor.
Well, I think that leads us nicely into the hierarchies and meshes, and I'm just going to sort of segue to that if it's okay. So my experience as an agent working with millennials is that they're very protective of their information until they're not. You crack the shell, and all of a sudden they are oversharers to the large extent until you find out to the point that they're more like their parents than they would ever want to admit. The example that I always come back to is that I've got more than one millennial client who named their pets in a series of names that are a continuum of what their parents were naming their pets. So once you have spent some time, probably windshield time with them, and they associate, hey, you're kind of like my dad, but cooler. Then the floodgates open up and you get it all from them. And I think this is really what hierarchies and meshes means to me, and that is that if you go back sort of maybe 15-ish years, real estate agents, we really were the conduit. That we really were the gatekeeper or the conduit to all information. Everything else was ancillary to what they heard from friends or colleagues or anything like that. The trusted advisor was the real estate agent. I think that is, I think we can all say that over these past 50 years that's been degraded, but one of my pet topics is what real value do agents bring to the world of real estate sales, and which of those aspects are likely to persist and which are likely to be replicated. And when I say replicated, I'm really talking about data and technology.
Right, so it's this concept where the opening the floodgates to trust, if you will, is something that technology, let's jump to big data and algorithmic business, that creates, if you look at how consumers interact with many other industries, it's happening all day long. It's chatbots are working. I'm working with Facebook. I'm having my algorithms fed to me. My news feed fed to me. All this kind of stuff. So what's happened is, I think what you're saying is how to use technology, how to use these meshes and sort of hierarchies to break down, to present you in the best possible way at the right time to say, I can meet face to face. I can break down the further barriers, but millennials, they like to keep people at bay, and they love to have all that information at their fingertips. And I think this sort of leads into a little bit of identity, right? So their own identity, and who we are as a consumer, but also I think Chad has done some amazing thinking around what does identity mean as it relates to a property, and sort of how he's using CRT Labs to create this data trail, if you will, related to a property, and what that will mean when it marries up to a consumer's identity through data.
Yeah, so thank you, Eric, thanks for all the kind words about the labs, man. Thank you for that.
Sure.
So I would say that a lot of the work that we're doing, it's going to create data, Internet of Things, right? You've heard that term, Internet of Things. I hope so. I've been talking a lot about it to people like you. Those are everyday devices that are connected to the internet, and you should really think about them, rather than just thinking about those devices on the computer, I'm thinking about them as physical applications, right? You can gain information about them through your phones and other devices. Now, more and more of these are going into homes every day. There's going to be about 20 billion of them by the year 2020. And that means even more information is created. Right now, every 2 days, we create enough information to equal year 2003 back to the beginning of recorded time. Every 2 days. When we put these billions of devices online, it will be every 2 hours. Right? So think about all that data and what it can tell you about a property and a person in that property. One of the things I raised when we talked about currency, there's a data currency that we haven't talked about that the way that you live in a property in the future could affect your viability to purchase a property.
Right, let's explore that.
Yeah.
That seems like, to me, when I hear that, I'm saying crazy talk. Right? That's really what, when he first brought this up, I'm like, that's crazy. The way I treat my home right now, like just take my 1895 wood frame, sort of, leaky home, which, yes, it's my responsibility to fix the windows, to figure out all the little leaks, but I'm saying because, A, I can't afford it, or I want to deploy my window money to, say, travel soccer fund or whatever, I'm going to be harmed then with my ability to buy a home in the future. Explain that.
Yeah,
it's a great concept, but
well, I think if you think about, we talk about the financial data, you talk about hierarchies and meshes. Hierarchies, you have this straight path to owning a home through financial data, right? Now, data's coming from everywhere. And so the way that you take care of a property in the future will be recorded by that home, right? You'll have a data trail. For instance, we're working on air quality sensors, just to promote what we're doing, that will help homeowners understand how they're living in a home, help them take reasonable action. You've got thermostats in the home, you've got locks, you've got security cameras. That data could show how you're living in the home and how you're treating them. Right? So I'm not advocating for this by any means, but I am saying there's going to come a time when certain authorities in place to make decisions about whether or not you get a loan for a home may look at that data as a way to say this person can be trusted with this asset and is someone I can trust to actually live in this property.
So to put it into sort of a tidy use case, I have a basement. And the sensor, I get one of your cool sensors, you've got it down to $50. I do it and I figure out I have radon in my basement. And I call the radon people and they say $35,000 to fix it. And I say, well, how about I split credit to that on the next sale? And you brought up a great point yesterday. Wouldn't you like, as a practitioner, to see what's been done with that?
Yeah. So we always joke around about either the self-healing septic system or the magical retaining wall. So many people get compensated at the time of closing for either a septic system that's on its way out the door or a retaining wall that's leaning, and that house comes up for sale 7, 8 years later, and magically, neither has been done. So I mean, I could imagine a map or a score or a heat map of some sort that indicated.
Just want to add on to that. You know, you think that sounds really far-fetched, but it already happens to your car.
Yeah.
Right. You already have a computer in your car, and the new buyer knows exactly how well you've taken care of your car.
Interesting.
Okay? And it's going to happen in your house, especially with IoT and connected stuff.
Yeah, and I would say, the other thing I would say to that too, so the way that that might be captured, and I'm going to use a term here, I think it's going to make Mark very happy, blockchain, is a way that this could actually...
Explain blockchain.
So blockchain essentially is a series of distributed databases that's peer-to-peer essentially, and it's an immutable record, meaning that once it's entered into the record, it can't be changed. And to once again promote NAR and what we're doing, because we're looking at this stuff. Mark's written two white papers on the subject, one more technical than the other, and I highly recommend you go look at this. But it's being used, one of the applications being used is something called Bitcoin or Ethereum, but they're not the same thing. They don't have to be used in the same way. But I think this coming into what we're doing is a way for you to see exactly what Sam's asking about. You know, oh, I see that on this date, this is when they took care of the retaining wall. This is when they found out about the retaining wall. So you can see what that difference in time differential is for action being taken.
And I think that this information almost has to come to the surface if you give it enough time, because it's potentially quantifiable. And if you could put a score on it, you could say that this homeowner's been an 82.5. That's something the public's going to want to know. It's easily understandable.
Interesting.
Yeah, I just think it has to come.
I mean, that's a very interesting concept. And so now you can see my initial reaction was crazy talk. And then when you get into the situation where cars are already giving this, it's breaking down those barriers. And I'm thinking that's how consumers, right, the ultimate client of our industry, they have those expectations, they bring it in. So let me jump to a little bit to algorithmic business, right? So I've always thought it would be so cool to do this. I want to search for a home, and I just start my process from this little magical device here that keeps everyone in the industry at bay. But I sort of want to cut to the chase. I want to say, fine, I'll put input information, I'll get pre-approved, I'll see exactly how much I can afford, and then based on that affordability matrix, I will then have ask you sort of where I'm thinking of living, and then it will show me those homes and only those homes, so I can start seeing exactly what is available to me. If I don't like what it is, for instance, $600,000 home in this area is not buying me much, but maybe over in this area it will. They'll give me information related to all the things that it would be important to me. In this particular example would be like a family, so schools and all this kind of stuff. I then book an appointment, it goes into some call center somewhere in the sky, and then magically an agent texts me and says, Mr. Brin, I can meet you, blah. I'm thinking that that's not too far away, and I have not had one step in an office, I've not had one interaction with a brand, aside from what the algorithm presents to me, but I've created efficiencies for myself. Is that scenarios out of the realm of possibility given algorithmic business and big data?
I've already seen it. Yeah. I've already seen it in action. I work with a company that monitors the Twitter stream for certain key phrases, and they know when someone is starting to get interested in buying a house, and they contact them.
Yeah, we saw, well, I mean, that was happening in 2012 with the Obama campaign.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they combed social media. They saved so much money transporting volunteers around the Midwest. Rather than sending 12 door knockers to go down one street and knock all the doors, they would target 6 or 7 doors on one street and send 3 people down that street. And they saved so much money helping turn the vote in their favor.
So what does that mean to this audience, both from the MLS side and as well as the brokerage side? And what should we be thinking about in terms of accelerated innovation, and how can RISO and standards help accelerate the pace of innovation at the broker MLS level?
Well, we see that, companies like SmartSim are doing this. As an example, that's more one company, but we're seeing that in this space, and they're good reason. So I think what we have to do, and some of the work Chris Lembrose has been doing to identify social APIs and the internet tracking is going on that course. And I think that's where we have to start thinking. What APIs do we want to integrate? The work that Scott Petronis is doing as well in the web API. I think I think what we have to do is if you have an idea where you think, I'm going to work through all the work groups here because I'm technically chair. If you have an idea you think might be a good idea to add to the transport or internet tracking work groups, go to the R&D group, have it tested out, maybe talk to Rob about any issues you might have with the data dictionary. I'm going to do it, aren't I? See if it matches up with any of the payloads work that's happening. And also, if you're doing any address parcel work, see if the code group might be involved.
So, how do you, from Home Services, starting the Captain Kirk's chair of Home Services of America, CIO, when you see the term big data algorithm business, what's your vision? Sort of you're going through a process right now. Without spilling all the beans from a competitive standpoint, what are you trying to tackle to sort of get to that level of ultimate customer service and agent client service?
Well, I think for us, exceptional service really is rooted in understanding. So how do we develop that deep understanding of the consumer, of the property, and their interaction with the agent around that property? When I think about personalized service, I think about surfacing the right kind of data at the right time, at the fingertips of the agent in a way that is actionable. And again, I think back to the trust, given that we think a lot about trust as speed of trust, right? Trust is
speed of trust, not speed to lead, but speed of trust. That's a
speed
cool
of
concept.
trust, Stephen Covey.
I like that.
Right, so the idea that trust is by far the most efficient catalyst for transactions, and that when we kind of crack open that shell, once we build that relationship of trust, in order to continue to earn that trust and retain that trust, we have to use the data very, very responsibly. And we have to make sure that that data is only used to benefit that consumer in a highly ethical way, and do it in a real-time manner. Right? So as we all think about all the data that we steward, we have tremendous amounts of data coming in, picking out those things that are really meaningful to that consumer at that particular time.
We as humans are setting up a schema on the back end somewhere that does that.
Right, so building algorithms and training algorithms against that data on a regular basis. Right, and really I think the emphasis is on training the algorithms against that data. So it's using machine learning, data science, to really make sure that we understand what is actually relevant, what drives a particular decision, and not taking the short-term view, which is, are you ready to buy or sell, but rather, how do we cultivate and develop your ability to be a great homeowner over time? And so there may be things that we can do in an early stage, like you mentioned. If you're not credit-worthy, there may be things that you do as you start to downsize or help your children get into homes. And again, that data, we would not be able to use that data unless we maintain that highest level.
Excellent.
Yeah, there are a few companies doing chatbots right now too. Right? These are artificial intelligence bots that learn and can communicate with you. There's some doing messaging. If you can't get to a call, they'll send a custom message to that person that has an interaction with them.
Custom, contextually relevant to my past conversations message, as if it was written by a human, but it's really a machine.
Exactly, and one of the crazier dystopian articles you can read on this is written in The Verge. It's called Speak Memory. It's about a woman who memorialized her best friend who died by creating a chatbot for conversations with him.
Wow.
So
that early stage stuff, that will come to impact us.
Absolutely, that's going to be.
And create efficiencies, because if I am, the biggest thing I always had when I was talking with, say, a lead comes in from an AdWords campaign, and the mark right now and the clients that I work with through Boomtown and sort of seeing the people who rock that system, their speed to lead is 90 seconds or less, right? And you talk to many agents, and they're like, what happened at 15? And you're saying, well, what if I'm busy? What if I'm... And so a very practical application of what Chad was saying is this intelligent chatbot messaging back to a consumer in a relevant, contextually relevant way, looks as if I'm responding in a nice way, and it gives the agent the freedom to do what she does best, which is face-to-face communications, which is what they love, by the way. So a lot of this, I look at it as allowing them to sort of perform their art, which the greatest agents are artists with clients. It's just, ultimately sort of what I love about the business.
Eric, could I put a plug in here? Because I want to say that the agents, the practicing licensed agents and brokers who compete should, I feel, this organization step forward and put themselves out there for the concept that Alon and Chad are talking about, to say, I still transact. Before this thing goes live, can I have a look? You know, let's talk about how we can take the rough edges off this thing, because so many times when a product comes out, it rankles the brokerage population, and it's unknown. It's the ways that the brokerage community will take something on are fairly subtle. The people who practice that make it to this body are thinkers, they're strategists, and they're here to help. And I think we should all be part of celebrate the fact that we've got all communities represented. So we should all work together.
I would absolutely agree with that. That's why this blended panel of Realty Alliance and RESO, I applaud Craig and Jeremy for putting it together. It's a really great concept. When you say smart materials, what does that mean? And I get, and how does it relate to connected humans and things? And you know, I guess one example I see right now is from a gentleman by the name of Tom Flanagan. He's the VP of technology for an amazing firm out of the Bay Area, Long Canal, and he's creating sensors to put into sort of high value homes and understand the microclimates that are around the Bay Area. And his argument is just an experiment at this point, saying that the quality of life is sometimes related to the environment for elements we cannot see. So the air quality, stuff like that. So he's thinking it could turn into a listing asset that inures to the benefit of Alon Canal. And I'm thinking that's a really interesting application of connected IoT, Internet of Things, and smart materials.
Yeah, so I'll talk about that. I think last year I put a picture up of a computer the size of a grain of sand that I held in my hand, developed by the University of Michigan. And they're not the only ones developing these computers. But imagine if your drywall had these types of sensors embedded in them, and it could tell you when there was a humidity, a leak behind that wall before it becomes a serious issue. These devices already, in the standalone version, are proving useful. Dave Conroy, one of my engineers, was in San Francisco for a wedding this weekend and received an alert that there was a leak in his basement. And it was mitigated by his neighbor because he was able to get a hold of them to help him mitigate that problem, rather than him going and finding this damage, right? Now, what I would say is, our homes are going to need things like firmware updates, because the windows will have these technologies embedded in them, the walls will have these technologies embedded in them. We'll be able to use something called zero user interface, where we talk to our home and it responds to us. We're not that far away from this, by the way. I think it's because you have to move the mouse there because it's getting away. Might be my love. All right. Anyway, it's the blue screen of presenting. But
blue screen of death.
Yeah, exactly. These devices, will become part of everyday lives. And in fact, we've met another researcher at the University of Michigan. She's working on a concept called ghosting, where our concept of living in a home extends itself beyond our home into other people's homes. So, for instance, my parents live in Iowa. What if, when I was in my kitchen, my mom could see a light flash in her kitchen saying that I'm in the kitchen, and she could come in there and automatically have a conversation with me, and we share that space and the intimacy of making a meal together, as a way to connect. So we're talking about a third set of real estate.
Say that again?
Yeah. So my mom sees a light go on in her kitchen that indicates that I'm in my kitchen at my home.
In Chicago.
In Chicago.
Yeah.
And so we're able to have a conversation, almost like a phone call, but automatic, and be able to talk and share a memory or reminisce or have a moment. Or I had a friend whose girlfriend is in Florida, and he's in Chicago, and the sound in his apartment of the cars going by in 1994, it's kind of like rain, that same type of oral sound, that noise, right? White noise. What if she could have that piped into her home from his bed, hear him snoring or whatever? That's a way to come. So these types of smart materials are coming. There's a light switch company we're working with who makes modular light switches, where rather than the electrician replacing the light switch, they put a box in there and you plug the light switch in. And as the technology updates, you unplug and put a new one in, right? So 3 years from now, you just unplug the light switch, put a new one in. And what if voice control is put into that?
So let's get to sort of the practical side of this, and I'm going to list my home, my nice 1895 Lincoln frame home, and you know the listing agent comes in and she says, let's get the staging, let's get rid of, you know, this furniture needs to be cleaned out, you got to paint this, you got to do all this. So now perhaps what you're implying is that as part of a staging exercise, it's to modernize some of the smartness of the home, because that will make it more sellable, more listing worthy, and much more competitive on the market. Is that a logical leap that's practical?
One brokerage in particular, Coldwell Banker, is starting to work on a smart home staging kit and having their agents give those to new to sellers. Now, yeah, I mean, there's some practicality to that. And there was a study, sorry I don't have the exact study in my head, that found that these devices could add $6,000 to the value of the home. And Coldwell Banker had their study where they found almost half the U.S. population is going to have some type of smart device by the end of this year in their home. And that people listing homes would be willing to spend up to $1,500 on these smart devices. And you actually don't need to spend that much. That's a lot of devices in today's parlance. I mean, you can buy a thermostat for $250. Utilities subsidize these now, so they're very expensive. Yeah, so I think the value for our agents and our brokers is to really be talking about these devices, how they're being used in insurance, how they're being used in utilities, and educating consumers on that. But also, do we have any agents in the room? Any agents in the room? Any brokers? Brokers as well?
Yeah, brokers.
Any brokers had an agent sell a home with a thermostat in it? Raise your hand if that's happened. Okay, how many of you reset that thermostat? Right. If you don't reset the good. If you don't reset that thermostat, the previous occupant still has access to it, right? And we had an agent in Philadelphia who told us about a home she sold, and 3 days later the buyer after the move called her and said, hey, our thermostat keeps jumping down, or jumping up to 80 degrees. And she's like, oh, well, let me talk to the seller, see what they say. She called the seller.
Said they shouldn't have been a jerk and closed it.
Yeah. The seller actually.
All right.
The seller actually was setting the thermostat on the person.
What do we got here?
Why does it say that? It's the thermostat, it's the doorbell, it's the garage door opener, it's all these things. If only there was a checklist that a broker could use.
Charlie, all right. We have a smart home checklist there, so that people can use to actually go over these things at closing.
So it's up to us as the brokerage community, as well as some of the training that would come in through MLS, perhaps around these issues. I love the idea of a data tail attaching to a home, and its corollary is walk score, stuff like that. Let's open it up to some of the audience if people have questions to this great panel. Does anyone have any specific questions? Please, Jeremy, thank you. Leading.
So we're about to give away a prize at the break. After the break, it's going to be a Ring Smart doorbell with a video camera on it. Talking about smart homes, what are the issues there, the concerns potentially that not resetting that device, or even better yet, what is going on with the data stream of recording who visits your home and then you sell your home? Is there a concept that that video is going to be available to potential future home buyers saying, I like that home, but wait a second, I don't like who's been visiting that home?
You know, some of these smart doorbells take it a step further, and they actually show what's going on in the street. Wouldn't it be interesting if the buyer, the prospective buyer, said, I want to see access, I want to see what happens here, I want to see what goes on.
Yeah,
I think it's real interesting.
Yeah. It's a case-by-case basis depending on the manufacturer. You need to read terms of service and the privacy policy for these devices. I mean, people don't like doing that. I just wrote a post on passwords because they're going to be important. You ever really hear about the internet going down this week? Right? There was that big DDoS attack. Yeah, and they blame the Internet of Things for that. When you look deeper, it's actually about passwords and default passwords being used. So I wrote an article on that today.
Like password being the password.
Yeah,
or
password
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Being used as passwords. Now, we've got to change our behavior and think about these things in a much different light than we have. So for your Ring doorbell, secure password should get you where you need to be. And we know, so there was a story about Ring being, their firmware needed to be updated because they had a hole. That story came out this past spring, but that hole was plugged about 9 months early. So the story came out 9 months after it actually happened. So how fresh is the content you're getting about these devices? I mean, it's a good doorbell. It's
You
going
want
to
to say something, Alon?
Yeah, so, you know, teams right now spend a lot of time managing the integrity of the data, right? Thinking about data management as really trying to maintain that trust. And today we think about it as being a sort of a snapshot in time. What was the condition of the home when it was used? In the world of the future, home, instead of having 150 or 400 or 600 fields, might have 150 or 400 or 600 streams of information.
Yeah, streams.
Right? It becomes an
Think about that.
information.
Streaming. Now, as a homeowner, I don't want to shut that stuff off.
Or how do we as an industry, I think my first question is, how do we as an industry maintain the integrity of that data so that the consumers trust that they're actually getting the real information?
So honestly speaking, yeah, sorry, go ahead. The concept of a living MLS, that's something
Yes.
we've been talking about.
That's cool.
The data comes in real time and you see it later.
I'm back here.
I have a question in regards to all this data that we were providing in order to, you know, use technology to sell our homes, to get more information out there for everybody. That at the same time, we're getting more and more people calling us up, the MLSs saying, it's too much out there. I've sold, my home has been sold, and now all of a sudden everybody knows what it looks like inside, they know everything about it. So we're right now talking about pushing it all out there. How do we pull it back?
Good question.
So, I think if we don't figure this out, we're going to see some serious government regulation coming down the path. Again, we talked about trust. Trust is all about expectations. When they provide you this information, when they provide their agent, broker, the information, they're providing, a seller, for example, is providing information for the purpose of marketing and selling their home. The idea that you're using it then to sell to financial services companies, ABMs, and who knows what else, and all these other uses that we've talked about down the line. Oh yeah, you know, it's for sold use later on some real estate portal. That's bogus, man. We have not set that expectation to the seller to provide that information. We say it's the broker owns the listing. Well, that information was provided again by the consumer for a purpose, and we need to be a lot more clear going down the line, setting expectations about what we intend to use that data for.
I agree with that. If you look to the EU, which they have this concept of right to be forgotten, meaning telling Google to take me out of the search results, that some of that stuff might pour over here in terms of this concept of proper stewardship around privacy and PII.
Exactly it.
Hi, my name is Chris Brugger. I'm with Commercial Specialty Group down in Charleston, South Carolina. I guess my question is, you know, talk about your big data repository, and you know, we're kind of talking about, you know, essentially how it is that we're going to police it and keep it within spec. You know, all the lookup tables are built in with hard values linked to, you know, enter your keys. But there's a lot that could be gained by just enforcing some simple business rules, you know, on feels like the descriptions and stuff like that. You know, they go through there, they scream through it in all caps. You know, so it's about 2 weeks writing a script that properly cased it, you know. But absent manual work on my side to fix that problem, it would go out there to the website and look absolutely horrible. You know what I mean? So I guess my question is, you know, obviously, you know, pull the feed in, dump it into a local repository, and we use that to drive the website. But we also are working, you know, dropping records off the archive back into your system. You know, as I understand that 3-step model. And obviously, it's going to be pruned. You know, once it gets back there, it'll be highly denormalized. You know, and you know, made as flat as possible. But you know, we were talking earlier today about business rules and, you know, how those apply to specific fields. And, you know, absent business rules to take care of these post-mission or post-work or pre-work problems, you know, where you've got somebody that's, you know, up on a platform doing some, or trying to work, doing stuff that they have no experience doing. It's just, you know, you can pull the plug on that real quick. It's dangerous. But we've got some serious consistency problems within the data itself.
Consistency.
Right.
So Want to tackle that? Concept of consistency and enforcing rules across this entire data set in terms of how it impacts sort of what we've been talking about.
I'm sorry. Yesterday I was with the PUID working group, and we were discussing a lot of different aspects of how the heck do we get a solid global unique ID on a piece of property, and how do we validate that it's actually what it represents. But the consistency aspect of things is kind of point number one. But it's also, we don't have we're talking about algorithmic business, but in our processes, as far as how I work versus how you guys work versus how another group works, we're all working with the same framework and specs. The way that we approach it is vastly different.
It's funny. It's really early days. I think I see where you're going. I think it's early days on the kind of thing we're looking for. How do I put this? I think we're going to have more and more data streams. I mean, I think that's one of the things you've heard from all of us here. There's going to be more and more streams of data that we can use to kind of confirm other streams of data and that kind of thing. But right now, we're dependent in many ways for things like compliance. There's so many things on the realtors reporting issues, right? There are crowdsourced compliance department in many respects, and God bless them. I mean, in terms of business rules, obviously the standards organization, and I'm leading that charge, is working on the syntax for business rules, and we're starting with listing input because of all of the work going on around that these days. But eventually it's going to move into display and like field level display rules, the kind of things you're talking about. But it's early days yet, and there's miles to go. That's why we're here.
Well, I just, before Chad hits on, I just think it goes also to the bigger concept you raised today. We, as an industry, need to take control before government regulation comes in and does it for us, which, that's what we're ultimately trying to do, is to take that control and prove that we're worthy of that stewardship. So, Chad.
Yeah, I guess I was going to say, some of those the compliance fields and the integrity of the data itself. You've got sometimes realtors that are in more than one MLS. I like to quote Buckminster Fuller: "Automation replaces the automaton." There's other work that they can be doing that these devices could then take those fields over. Like the lawn set with instead of 100 fields, you've got 100 streams. And that I think is the net positive. That's just getting there's going to be bumpy.
Right. A question over here too.
So I have more two statements really. One is the six of you are so brilliant, and this was an awesome session. But as you guys are talking, our vice president of marketing at RPR sent me a chatbot that we're rolling out live, and so I'm trying it as you're saying it. So like the stuff that you guys are talking about that's coming out in the industry is actually happening right at the moment. It's really cool to be here and to be a part of this.
Awesome. And great context, because some of that's the issues that we've talked about wrap around the concepts of privacy, chatbot, stewardship, all that's huge. Awesome. Good job, RPR. Question. Hello, that's Mike Phil Donahue. Okay.
While you're running that back, I want to say one thing about the human-computer connection, and I want to bring it back to Gartner. Stephen Prentice, a VP at Gartner, said, this is really relevant to our brokers in the room, in the new workforce of 2030, the most successful organizations will optimize the use of all of their resources, both human and machine, for competitive advantage. An increasing portion of your workforce will not be human. Machines are very good for consistency, performance, predictability, efficiency, and safety, but they can't match human skills and ingenuity, novelty, art, creation, emotion, and to address variability and provision of context. So, again, we talk so much about computers and people and how these things are going to work together in all of our businesses. It's going to be so interesting. And it's so much of it's going to involve data standards and moving information around and doing it right and doing it safely and securely.
And just a quick comment, because I know you got a question back there, but a quick comment, that's what's been really cool about what Jeremy's done. He's actually reached out outside the industry to pull other groups in. We've been having that happen for the last few years. And so that's needed for what we're doing. So, thank you, Jay.
Yeah, sure.
And Reese.
Yeah, so I'm an agent in San Francisco. My clients are willing to do items for savings. So are there insurance companies out there that are actually recognizing the Internet of Things for inside the home? Like I'm a good driver, so I get a discount every year?
Yep. Yeah, State Farm, there's a camera called the Canary, which I think is one of the more secure cameras out there. Canary.is, we work with them, and State Farm will give you a discount on your owner's insurance for a burglar. They count it as a burglar alarm because it has a 90 decibel siren in it, and it has a 144-degree view. So they will give you a discount on your insurance for that. Liberty Mutual will give you a Nest Protect, which is a $99 device. If you install it, and they get certain pieces of data to know it's working, to know that you have it on. They need to know that. They'll give you up to 5% off your premiums. Liberty Mutual has a few programs. There's Hartford Steam Boiler has some stuff. I mean, there's a ton. We're working to educate our members on where those are at, so they can take that to their clients and work with clients on that type of thing. So yeah, there's a number of companies.
Want to be just a word of caution on the IoT stuff, though. How do I put this? 75% of these smart locks on the market are trivial for a hackerish child to walk through.
Yeah, that's actually because they're not following best practices.
Absolutely, they're not.
And so we're actually working with those companies to do that.
When they do, call me and I'll buy one.
I'll send you the first one.
Question. It's fine to have audience involved.
I'm Steve Wastenberg with ZipLogic. I think maybe the elephant in the room here is this sense that all of this data coming in, everything known about everybody and all the automation that it really puts together, where does the agent fit in this down the road? Or is it that when you quoted Gannett, the emotional, the creative, do our agents need to be more emotional and creative to actually stand out above all this data that is automating what they would normally do as kind of a transactional person? And how can we create that kind of environment for an agent to really thrive in this emotional and creative world?
No, I mean, that's an amazing comment, and I think that sort of gets to where we want to go. Is part of when I get in front of any agent, or group of agents, brokerages, or agent conferences, I talk about my job as this technologist type of person is to inspire you to do the best you can with your art. And I do think the best agents have an art. They exude their creativity. That is why they're in the business. That's what technology should always focus on allowing them to do, is to bring that art form to bear on the client interaction, because then we all benefit.
I think that it's a great question. Fabulous question, and I think that this is the idea of that which an agent brings to the table and that which persists, that can't be replicated by technology. And I think as an example of that is, in our area, we'll often talk about physically, geographically making concentric circles of showing houses in a wider radius, a wider radius, a wider radius, until it gets too rural, and the person, either through verbally or through body language, says, I'm done. And then you start moving it back inwards. When in reality, about 3 weeks ago, I had a family coming up to look at houses, and it turns out that because of a confluence of budget and the fact that they were retiring, they did better, their process did better by starting outward, coming inward in circles until they realized they couldn't afford it anymore. And so, and that was either through verbal or through body language, the same thing. But the fact is that I don't think that will ever be replicated. And to encapsulate that is, how does a particular client's unique set of circumstances violate the normal rule of behavior, or the business rules, or the practices by the agent? And that is such a game time decision.
Yeah, I think when I said the thing about evolution versus disruption, I think we have new tools, right? We go from Stone Age to the Iron Age, and on and so forth, Industrial Age, right? And this is another iteration of that. And so I think the value comes in where we can actually help the homeowner find a better quality of life, right? And that's what these devices are about. Now, I'm sorry, Matt. Why don't you go ahead?
Well, learning to use the new technologies artfully, that takes time. If you think about we'll go away from electronic technology, let's go to construction technology. Look what happened when we got concrete. We ended up with great Lloyd Wright buildings that leaked like SEDS. Okay, and eventually we learned to use concrete better, and then steel came along, and we learned to make steel buildings, and boy, some mistakes were made. And again, we learn, and we adapt, and with any new technology, electronic or otherwise, it takes time to learn to use that new technology in an artful manner.
Yeah. And with that, we have to end this fabulous session. Give a hand to